People who have cats had a 37% lower chance of having a heart attack than people who don't have cats. This research was published by scientists who followed more than 4,000 Americans for 20 years. Dog owners showed no heart attack benefit at all. But in Tokyo, researchers found that dog owners were 40% less likely to get dementia after following more than 11,000 people. And I'm going to explain an interesting thing that happened. And the largest study ever done on this question covered over 3.8 million people. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what the research really shows about our pets and your health. The strong findings, the surprising ones, and the parts that often get misinterpreted. Whether you already have a pet, or you're thinking about getting one, or you're concerned about your loved one's health, this could be important. If you know someone with a cat or a dog they adore, please send them this video. They're going to love the stories, and they deserve to hear what the science actually says about the animals sleeping on their couch. I'm Neil K. Shah, a Johns Hopkins and NIH-funded caregiving researcher and the CEO of Cariaya. I've helped thousands of families navigate aging, dementia, and serious illness. I'm not a clinician, but a leading researcher and innovator in caregiving. And through my work, I've often watched pets bring such joy and a twinkle in the eyes of older adults and people living with serious illness. I personally love pets, and I found it really fun to do hours of research to make this video. So let's get into it. Let's start with the cats. This one surprised everybody, including the researchers that were working on it. Back in 2008, Dr. Adnan Qureshi was working at the University of Minnesota. He pulled up a big federal health survey called NHANES. Here's what that survey does. The government examines thousands of Americans, weighs them, checks their blood pressure, and draws blood. Then, years later, researchers look up who died and what they died of. It's one of the best tools we have because it tells us what really happened to people, instead of what someone would guess would happen. So Dr. Qureshi looked at over 4,000 people and he asked one question. Did owning a cat line up with dying of heart disease? And here's what he found. People who had owned a cat had about a 37% lower risk of dying from a heart attack than people who never had one. And that's after his team accounted for age, sex, race, blood pressure, smoking, diabetes, cholesterol, and weight. So it isn't just that cat owners happen to be healthier or thinner or younger by default. Here's the part that makes cat people very happy. Dogs showed absolutely no benefit for heart attack prevention, no lower risk. Think about how strange that is. The dog gets you out of the house, sometimes 2 to 3 times a day. The cat just sits on your lap and purrs. And yet it was the cat that lined up with a healthier heart. No one knows for sure why. Dr. Qureshi's own guess was that living with a cat may quiet down your body's stress response, the part of your nervous system that keeps you keyed up. That's his hypothesis, not a proven fact. Now for the caveats. Those 4,000-something people weren't a random group of Americans. They were all people who had reported an allergy because that's who got asked about pets. It's just one study, and it ran in a small journal after being presented at a conference. So enjoy the finding, but we can't yet build a health plan around it. I think it's a promising clue. And hold on to that word clue, because in a few minutes, I'm going to show you why almost every study in this field runs into the same challenges. But first, I have an interesting story that I found about cats and a Stone Age boat. In 2001, a French archaeologist named Jean-Denis Vigny was digging at a site on the island of Cyprus. He found a grave with an adult buried inside alongside gifts like a polished stone axe, seashells, a pendant, red ochre. And a couple feet away in its own little pit, facing the same direction as the person, a cat. Around 8 months old. It wasn't butchered, it was just buried. The grave is about 9,500 years old. And here's why that really surprised people. Cyprus is an island, and there were never any wild cats living on it. So that cat didn't just walk there. Someone put the cat in a boat and rowed it across open water on purpose, way back in the Stone Age. Before this discovery, we thought people started keeping cats in Egypt around 4,000 years ago. This finding pushed that back thousands of years and moved it out of Egypt entirely. Somebody 9,500 years ago cared enough about one particular cat to carry it across the sea. And when it died, they laid it in the ground next to a person pointed the same way. The Egyptians came later and took it further. They had a cat goddess named Bastet. They'd even built cat cemeteries. There was even a fable that a Persian king conquered Egypt in 500 BC by having his soldiers carry cats into battle because the Egyptians wouldn't attack cats. Now that comes from a writer who lived about 700 years after the battle, but I think it's a really interesting legend. Okay, so now it's the dog's turn, and this one is also really big. In 2023, Dr. Yu Taniguchi and his team at Tokyo Metropolitan Institute of Gerontology published a study of 11,000 older adults between ages 65 and 84, all living in one district of Tokyo. Every single person was independent at start. That means nobody needed care. The team followed them for about 4 years to see who developed dementia serious enough to help with daily life, or to need help with daily life. In Japan, that gets recorded through the National Long-Term Care System, which means a doctor has to make the call. Surprising result. Dog owners were about 40% less likely to develop serious dementia. And what about cats in this dementia study? No difference. So cats went on the heart, dogs went on the brain. And when I see a pattern like that, I get really curious. So I went into the back tables of the research paper where the researchers break the groups into smaller pieces. And there was the answer. Dog owners who also exercise regularly were about 63% less likely to develop serious dementia. Dog owners who did not exercise got no benefit at all. And dog owners who were not lonely or isolated got nearly all of the protection too. So think about that, because it's the details that really matter. The dog just by itself wasn't the medicine. The walking and the emotional connection were the medicine. The dog was the thing that made people take it. Every single day, twice a day, at 78 years old, even in the rain, when they absolutely would have had to just otherwise stay in the chair. I think that doesn't downplay the benefits of a dog. In some ways, I think it's a better finding because it tells you how to get the benefit instead of just telling you, go get a pet dog. This study was a very large group, followed over time, and carefully adjusted for over 20 other factors. But still, 4 years is a short time when you're dealing with dementia. So I think it's a good study, and we could use much more research on this topic. Here's the biggest number in the field. In 2019, Dr. Caroline Kramer and her colleagues combined 10 separate studies covering over 3.8 million people, followed for about 10 years on average. Dog owners were 24% less likely to die during that time from any cause, 31% less likely to die from heart disease. And among people who had already survived a heart attack or stroke, the difference was even larger. That same year, researchers at Uppsala University in Sweden used national health records covering about 182,000 people who'd had a first heart attack and 158,000 people who'd had a first stroke. Dog owners survived both better, and the biggest difference showed up in people who lived alone. I think that last detail matters more than anything else in the headlines. The dog helped the most for the people who had no one else in the house. Still, I think there's a problem underneath all of this, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Ask yourself who owns a dog at age 75. Someone who can walk it, someone who can bend down and fill the water bowl, someone who can afford dog food and a visit to the veterinarian, someone whose landlord allows pets, somebody with enough energy and enough hope to take on a 10-year commitment. What if that person was already healthier, more mobile, and more connected than the person without a dog before the dog even showed up? So when we find sometimes that dog owners live longer or healthier, sometimes we can't tell how much is the dog itself and how much is it that healthier people are the ones who can have dogs. Researchers call it the healthy owner problem, and sometimes that shadows many of these studies. Yet, are any of these benefits real? Yes, and I'll tell you exactly which parts. But first, an interesting story about a puppy who died 14,000 years ago and the family who stayed up with it. In 1914, quarry workers near Bonn, Germany, blasted into a grave. Inside were a man, a woman, and the bones of a dog. The find sat in a museum for 100 years. Then, in 2018, a researcher named Luke Janssens took another look at the dog's teeth. The dog had been about 6 months old when it died, and its teeth showed the clear damage of canine distemper, a terrible virus, which it had caught at about 4.5 months old. And here's what that story tells us. A puppy with severe distemper, 14,000 years ago, with no medicine of any kind, dies within days unless somebody keeps it warm, gets water into it, cleans it, and sits up with it. This puppy lived for weeks after it got sick. It could not have done that on its own. So, what if well before humans invented farming, before even writing, before the wheel, some family nursed a sick puppy to health? It was too young to hunt, too young to guard, it was just theirs. And when it died anyway, they buried it with their own dead. That's the oldest evidence we have of a human being taking care of an animal purely out of love. The bond that you have with the animal in your house is older than even writing or agriculture. Think about that. I think it makes you appreciate pets even more. So what do I think of these studies? The pet by itself isn't, the medicine on its own, but I think it's a great encouragement. I think movement and connection are the real medicine, and a pet can really help with both. In May 2023, the US Surgeon General put out an official warning about loneliness. He said that being socially disconnected carries a risk of early death, similar to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. He reported that ongoing loneliness and isolation are linked to roughly a 50% higher risk of developing dementia in older adults. And he cited a 12-year study where thinking skills declined about 20% faster in people who felt lonely. I think it's one of the biggest stories in our society that totally goes underreported, and I see it every day in my work. Thousands of older adults across the country are lonely. It's a real danger, and it's getting worse for many people who are living alone. I think having a pet is one of the most reliable ways anyone has ever found to fight loneliness. Because unlike a gym membership, a dog doesn't accept excuses. It needs to go out every day at 8 in the morning, whether or not you like it. It gets you outside, gets sunlight, makes small talk with your neighbors. A cat gives you something warm in the house, someone who's glad that you came home, especially at an older age when sometimes the world quietly even stops noticing you. There's also other support here too, based on other research. In 2023, a study in a journal called JAMA Network Open followed nearly 8,000 older adults in England. They showed that pet owners lost their memory and word skills much more slowly. And the effects showed up almost entirely in people who were living alone, which was the same finding as in the Tokyo study. I think being alone is genuinely dangerous to our health, especially as we age. And a pet, whether a cat or a dog, is a daily companion, an all-weather, no excuses reason to move and connect with someone or something. One note of caution, though, because I tell this to older adults that I talk to. The CDC looked at emergency room records and estimated about 86,000 fall injuries a year involving cats and dogs. Most involved dogs, people tripping over them or getting pulled by a leash. Broken bones were the most common injury, and the highest injury rates were in people ages 75 to 84. I think at 80 years old, a broken bone or a broken hip is not just an inconvenience. It's one of the most serious things that can happen, so be very, very careful. The CDC didn't say older people should avoid pets. They specifically said this should be weighed against the real benefits and recommended things like obedience training and carefully watching for tripping hazards. Yet, I think it's an important risk to think about and address. Just make it part of the decision to get a pet. 3 additional quick mentions. As our immune systems age, infections from animals matter more. So wash your hands, be careful around bites and scratches. When memory starts to slip, pet care slips in specific ways. The cat gets fed 4 times or not at all. And the question many families avoid until an emergency: who takes care of the animal if your elderly parent goes to the hospital? Answer that on a calm Tuesday afternoon, not from a hospital hallway at 2 a.m. One last piece of history, because I think people figured this out long before science did. In 1790, a Quaker woman named Hannah Mills died in an English asylum under conditions her community found unforgivable. So a Quaker tea merchant named William Tuke decided to build something better. His York Retreat opened in 1796. And part of his method was this: patients were given rabbits and chickens to look after. His reasoning was really simple. A person with a living creature depending on them practices gentleness and self-control and gets something back in return for it. That was way back in 1796. A tea merchant with no medical training worked out that being needed by an animal actually helps people heal. Florence Nightingale wrote in 1860 that a small pet is often an excellent companion for the sick. Sigmund Freud kept his dog Jofi in the room during therapy sessions and thought she helped him read his patients. And in the 1960s, a psychologist named Boris Levinson discovered by accident that his dog Jingles got a withdrawn child talking when he himself couldn't. I think every one of these people noticed the same thing, that pets can bring a great benefit to our lives. So what do we do with all of this? Pick the right animal for the person as they are now, not as they were 10 or 20 years ago. A calm, grown, house-trained animal beats a puppy or a kitten almost every time for an older adult. If someone's balance is a worry, a cat may be the smarter choice than a dog that pulls on a leash. Handle the trip hazards first if considering a pet, especially for an older person. Things like obedience training, no long retractable leashes, good lighting in the hallways. Use programs that already exist. The Pets for Elderly Foundation covers adoption fees and the first vet exam for adults 60 and up at partner shelters. Meals on Wheels works with PetSmart charities to deliver pet food alongside with meals to homebound seniors. Their national line is 1-888-998-6325. In their surveys, 98% of older people with pets said the animal helps them feel less lonely. Red Rover, the Pet Fund, and Banfield Foundation help with vet bills too. Know your rights on housing. Under the Fair Housing Act, an assistance animal can sometimes stay, even in a building that has a no pets rule. So if a building manager tells your elderly relative that the animal has to go, that may not be the final word. A legal aid office or an elder law attorney might be able to help tell you where you stand. And if the honest answer is that a real animal is too much, there are other emerging options. New York State has given out more than 30,000 robotic companion pets to isolated older adults. And around 70+% of them say they felt less lonely afterwards. I think it's preliminary data, but I have watched an older woman with advanced dementia pet a robotic cat and get calm for the first time in hours. So these can legitimately help people. 14,000 years ago, a family sat up through the night with a dying puppy that couldn't do a single thing for them. They kept it warm, they got water into it, and when it later died anyway, they laid it in the ground besides their own dead. They weren't lowering their heart attack risk. They weren't thinking about preventing dementia. They just couldn't leave the puppy alone in the dark by itself. I think that's the thing all these medical studies never quite catch. The number that matters isn't 40% or 37%. It's whether somebody in that house has a reason to get up tomorrow morning and something to look forward to. If someone you know came to mind while you watch this, either an elderly mom that's living alone with her cat or a neighbor whose dog is the only person who greets him, please send them this video. And if a pet might be right for you or your family, do it for the 8 a.m. walks and the neighbors you'll meet and the warm thing on the couch that's happy when you're home. I think the health benefits are just a free and great side effect. I'm Neil K. Shah. Let's take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.